Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they make to get where they are in life now. In this episode, I'm talking with Jordan Gruber, a true wordsmith. His accomplishments as a writer and an interviewer are numerous. See if you can keep up with us as we bounce around from his life to philosophy and much more. Links to Jordan and timestamps for everything that came up in our conversation can be found in the show notes. Please support the show by leaving a comment or a review. I'd love to know what you're thinking. Check out our affiliate links in the show notes. Might find something of value. Enjoy the conversation. Awesome. Welcome, Jordan. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, we talked about, was it the end of last year in December that we first talked about
Yeah,
this?
early December. I think you asked me maybe mid-December. Are you hearing those chimes? No.
No, I
Good.
can't hear the chimes.
Great.
So that's good. Yeah, I guess it was a while ago. So yeah, it's good to actually finally get here. It's curious. I was going through just a little. I don't do a ton of prep because I want to have the most organic conversation I can. But I was looking through the email you sent because I asked for a little bit of bio and was looking at your website and everything. And obviously you're a lawyer, so you got your JD, but it seems like you spent most of your career writing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I did want to go to law school, and I did
Uh-huh.
in particular want to go to the University of Virginia School of Law, Mr. Jefferson's
It's a great
law
school.
school, and there was a kind of a spiritual attraction. And I was one of those people who early on was very clear that most of the traditional jobs that I was suited to doing would be really hard for me to do because I didn't fit into the system. So when I heard someone like Tim Leary talking about people being cogs in the machine, and
Mm-hmm.
yet I was working in Manhattan as a grant writer after I got my master's degree from SUNY Binghamton, and I had already taken the LSATs and I got involved with Insight seminars,
Okay.
and I had an epiphany during an Insight seminar that I should go to Charlottesville, and I
So
did.
that's kind of unique in and of itself that at an early age, because you were in your early 20s before when you first went to get your JD at UVA.
No, I was 25, yeah, when I
You're
started,
25. So it's still, I
because I
mean, it's
got the
still early
master's
20s.
degree as well, and I took sort of a year off hanging out in Binghamton and practicing martial arts and not doing much.
So how did you figure out at a fairly early age that you weren't equipped or wouldn't be happy doing the quote unquote, normal job?
Because of the life of the mind and like the creativity and imagination. And so here's an absolute total conceit I have, but it'll be balanced out by something.
All right.
I remember being 3, 4 years old and
Uh-huh.
thinking, clearly I have one of the most powerful minds on the planet, but my body is nowhere even like in the top half. What am I going to do about that? You know?
And
And
you
so,
were 3, 4 years old having this
yeah, I
this
really thought,
conversation with
yeah,
yourself?
yeah. And later on, and I topped out in math in fifth or sixth grade. I did get a 12.9 on the math and verbal in the Iowa test. But after that, I was no longer like in the special math kids group. It was
Right.
obvious that that wasn't my talent. So it was the words, it was the
Hmm.
writing. But also from that same age, I remember taking a typewriter, an old Royal Crown typewriter, and just randomly typing letters and then taking the paper out and running up to my mother and saying, Mommy, did I make any words? Did I make any words? And in the background, you would hear my grandmother, whose name was Mary, yelling, Lola, stop him. It's not a toy. Don't let him play with it. So,
Wow.
my mother will tell you that I wanted to be a writer as early as age 5. Now, and my dream of what employment would look like would be that I would have interesting conversations with
Mhm.
people, and that would be it. I didn't realize I would have to write everything down and then put it into an information database and then make mind maps and then iterate between 3 and 10 times on each. That's what you get paid for, not the
Right.
conversations. But
Right.
still, so when I did practice law for 51 weeks,
It's exactly 51 weeks.
yeah,
That's
trust me,
awesome.
I know this. And then I left for Gnosis Magazine. There was a guy named Gary who was of counsel. He was an older, he had a PhD in psychology, and he was like,
Mhm.
Jordan, you spent so much time in law school. You did so well there. You were near the very top of your class. You've only been here a year. Give it another try. And I couldn't do it. I was fantasizing about throwing a bowling ball through my big plate glass window of Cooley
Yeah,
Godward, because
that's a good sign.
that way they wouldn't arrest me
Uh-huh.
probably, but I'd be,
Maybe.
so I was, it was bad. I'm gonna get a little emotional here. My wife's father died a few months ago. The
Mm.
only person who sat down with me and looked me in the eyes and said, if you really don't want to go back and can't go back, you don't even have to go back this afternoon. Is that bad? Don't go back.
Wow, that's amazing. So,
I did go back.
so
I
you
did go
were
back one more
married.
week, but then I left. Yeah.
Did
And my
you get
wife was very disappointed when I made the choice to, you know,
leave?
leave the high
Yeah.
paying career,
Well, I mean, especially at that point in time, being a lawyer, I think had a certain level of status. I think now, there's a little bit more stigma around it. I mean, it's still, to some people, it's an incredibly honorable thing. To other people, it's like, oh, like, we need another lawyer kind of thing.
Yeah, I
So
think the shine was off
the shine was
already by
off. Yeah.
1988. I mean,
Oh, okay.
we
Yeah.
always said that 1 out of 10 of the people who we knew who went to law school with would enjoy working in a big firm where you're,
Mhm.
it's a soulless march of hours for 10 years. And if you survive and you go through that, you make $700,000 or $800,000 a year or more, right? But
Yeah.
who wants to do that? I couldn't, because also from junior high school, right? I'd been interested in parapsychology, and in
Hmm.
high school, I was already interested in philosophy. And the teacher would say, "Are there any other questions?" And I would always say, "What is the meaning of life?" So I'd always been into that whole other side, and practicing law in such a formulaic way, fighting
Yeah.
other really smart people for money day after day after day. It would have killed me.
I mean, it's kind of, in a weird way, especially if you're, um, oh, it depends on the type of law, perhaps, but I feel like there's a certain level of jousting. It's like being a knight, on horseback, but you're using words and briefcases
Absolutely.
instead of shields and briefings and whatever as your ammunition.
It's you're expected to put so much of your life energy. The last case I worked
Mhm.
on was Johnson and Johnson versus Amgen over something called erythropoietin, and the lawsuit was for an infringement, and it was for $18 billion, and nobody had any sense of humor. So we had to go to Chicago into this huge warehouse with huge boxes, and your goal was to read through everything.
Oh,
This was,
geez.
so to find any smoking guns or counter evidence or anything interesting.
Hmm.
Day on end, living in hotels. It's like, no, man, I'm
Yeah,
a
that's,
creature. I'm a child of nature. I
yeah.
cannot do this. So I didn't.
So, I mean, you knew that that wasn't right. You tried it, and then you got confirmation. The practicing law or studying law, did you have an ulterior motive? Was there anything else that, like, was this just training to be a writer because of the research and the amount of writing you have to do just to get a JD, or you know?
I thought I could do it. I thought it might be public. I mean, when I was in college, I spent a semester or two volunteering for the New York Public Interest Research Group.
Mhm.
And then later on, when I worked very briefly for the Earth Island Institute, I got to meet David Brower. But I'm really not all that good in working under other people's direct control,
Yeah.
and watching me. It usually doesn't work. I'm not an alpha male, but I don't like having an alpha male or the equivalent over me. And I rebel having people like this is funny, and I think I can say this in this book that I've been helping my client with on meditation. At one point, I needed to basically edit a section in real time on
Mhm.
the screen in a Zoom call with him. And I felt like I was in like fifth grade and it was a test. And he agreed with everything, but I was like talking out loud and going, no, we have to have it like this way and that way, because look, we use this word here, I turn it here. But when we were done, I realized that when I'm observed, for whatever reason, I'm one of those people that when I'm observed, I notice it and it often affects me. So I used to have an office downtown. Now I only have this office in the basement, but I'm very productive.
Yeah. It's
Sometimes
interesting you say that about, having to write in front of someone. Uh, I'm kind of, I don't know, kind of an undercover writer, or maybe at this point in time, a repressed writer, because I'm not writing as much. Like I'll have ideas and I'll write them down. I've got blogs that I've written but never posted. But I got hired years ago as an actor, to be the lead in this film. But I read the script and I'm like, I can't accept this role. And the producer was like, well, would she knew she'd read some of my writing in the past, and she's like, well, would you consider doing a rewrite on it and then, play the role. And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I was like, well, how much time do we have? And, is the writer involved? Well, the writer turned out to be the director. So it was a writer director
Ooh.
situation. And I was like, and how's he going to feel? And the general consensus was he'll be fine, just kind of walk him through while you're making the changes. So for a solid week, and I only had 2 weeks to do this because it was low budget, or really no budget practically. So I sat there for a week. I had 2 weeks. I sat there for a week and I wrote in front of him. I was Xing stuff out, telling him why I was getting rid of characters and condensing characters and, why things weren't working.
Right.
And after a week, I realized that I don't know that there was anything that he was going to say boo to or no to or whatever, because he just didn't have the experience I had. He didn't have.
Well, he trusted you.
Yeah, he trusted me. I proved myself, and he just didn't have the background that I had. I've spent my entire life studying story and character. And so, although my main focus wasn't for writing, I gained his trust. And once I realized that at the end of the first week, I was like, I'm killing myself and slowing myself down to do this in front of him when I probably could have done it faster without him. And then I realized also I'm too far along in the process and where I'm going with this thing, that I can't really go back and just throw it out and start over again, which is what I really should have done. I should have gauged him first, found out where he's at, won his trust, threw his script out, and then done a page one rewrite.
Right.
Just using the same character names.
It's
and the same
easier
concept.
to start from scratch than to actually fix somebody else's stuff, especially if they're watching. Yeah, no kidding.
It was brutal. And
well, how'd the movie come out?
It's okay. I mean, one of the things that I was told, because like I said, it was a 2-week thing. So I finished the direction we were taking it, and I wasn't excited about the script, but I thought there was something there. And what I was told is that we're going to have time, because this is kind of like a friends and family kind of thing. It's such a low budget, no budget project, and everyone's doing this on favors and thanks very much kind of thing. So I was told that we're going to have time on set to play with things, improvise, and figure it out. Well, the producer that told me that and hired me, because of the situation on the ground, was almost never on set. Not her fault. This is just the difficulties of making a no budget film or any kind of budget film. She had other obligations. So we didn't get to play. We didn't really improvise. And so we didn't get to expand or fix any of the things that I didn't have time to do on the page. So the lesson was, if it's not on the page and you're not happy with it, then it's never going to end up on screen.
Probably not.
You've got to fix everything before you start filming. And then if you come up with new amazing stuff while filming, great. Otherwise, don't expect it to be there in the end product. And it wasn't. So,
oh wow,
it was a great lesson. It was an exceptional experience. I met amazing people. But c'est la vie. Not everything can be
not everything works out the way you hope it will.
No, I don't know that much. I mean, it could work out better, it could work out just different, but I don't know if much actually ends up the way you think it's going to end up.
No, actually, I have a thing where before I go to a place or meet someone or go to a restaurant, whatever it's going to be, I try to imagine like what the space will look like. Yeah. And I'm almost always 100% wrong. It's like, no, it's not like that at all. So yeah. It's just funny. The world is very diverse, and we're only kind of aware of the thing we're focusing on at any given moment.
No,
it takes a single object. Yeah,
it does. I mean, I think that's part of the consciousness, the way our consciousness works. We're only able to focus on so much. The brain chemistry, or the ability to light up all the different regions, you can light up 100% of your brain over the course of the day, but you're only going to really be able to utilize it consciously right. One point at a time.
So William James's metaphor, and I learned this from Jim Fadiman, my co-author and writing partner and all the rest, is that you think of like a glass bottom longboat going down the Mississippi, right? Wherever you're over, you can shine a flashlight down and see what's there. Now, it's not that that stuff that's on the other side of the river is always unconscious.
Right.
You can go over there and start doing dream analysis and lucid dreaming and hypnotic inductions and taking psychedelic. You can get there, but you
Yeah.
have to, move the boat, and then you're not going to have a lot of time to do the other things that you were just set out on the boat for.
Right.
Maybe. Well, James doesn't say that, but yeah.
Right. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing. And I mean, ultimately, I think maybe that's part of the reason why we have a linear experience of life or of existence, is because, it tracks, it's easier to track, it's easier to keep track of and create a story to manage all of the data and information when it's
Right.
done through a linear progression.
But again, it's a linear progression of selves moving in and out in my model.
Yeah.
So it's there's always something about me that's the same. I do believe in soul now, and like
Yeah.
Gary Zukav's The Seed of the Soul. I feel I have a soul, and it's a single autopoietic evolutionary dynamic that holds me, this Jordan Gruber, together. But
Mhm.
within that body, being, mind, soul thing, I do have these different minds or selves, and they do
Mhm.
go by patterns. And so, yeah, we end up, because that makes it even more complex. So we do tell ourselves basically a linear story. I mean, I guess there are people alive who are living like Data in Star Trek and are consciously aware of all the timelines they're in. One thing I can do pretty reliably sometimes, not really, but occasionally, is feel the future washing backwards into the past. For
Yeah.
certain sorts of events, if I feel certain sorts of ways, I kind of know what's coming, and I'm not really surprised by when it shows up. And I think and we all have access to that all the time. But I
Well, I
also think we
mean,
have access to telepathy and everything else. We just
yeah.
don't use it because we don't allow ourselves, because for a lot of reasons.
Well, it also, you know, let's say that we're fully telekinetic beings. It would massively interfere with a linear story model because, the conjecture scientifically is starting to look at, well, the speed of thought might be faster than the speed of light. I don't believe they figured out how to quite quantify that or
Yeah, how do you
measure it,
test that? Interesting.
but I've heard that kicked around, because there's a lot of physicists, theoretical physicists, and even um, research, or what do you call it? Practical physicists, the research, experimental physicists.
Like the guys at
That
CERN and, with the
Yeah,
big
and
colliders.
a lot of these guys are starting to move towards philosophy because, and guys and girls, guys, people, um, moving towards philosophy because they're not able to do some of the research and some of the work they want to do experimentally or theoretically, because the language and the models don't allow for it.
Right.
Where if they go on the if they go towards physics, or excuse me, philosophy, it's still a mathematical model. Philosophy, most people I don't think understand that philosophy is a mathematical model. It's a science.
A lot of it, the logic certainly is, and
Yeah.
and everything that's, I mean, that's one huge 20th century strain of philosophy. I mean, you got people like Wittgenstein and,
Mhm.
those guys. Yeah, they can show you that and what do we end up with? Is it Gödel's theorem that you can't ultimately prove anything because you always need another referent outside of the thing you're proving.
Yeah.
So we're always in kind of an infinite regress or infinite progress, always.
God, you know something? You might be the one and only person I can ask this of and get a response. I've this has come up in at least one other conversation episode that I've had. I came upon a word, idem potent. Idem potent.
How do you spell that?
IDEM
Uh-huh.
POTENT.
Yeah, I've never heard that. Yeah, let me write it down.
It's a fascinating word, and so I was sitting there thinking, and I did a Google search for a mathematical equation to where it has infinite possible permutations of the equation, but the outcome
Uh-huh.
is the same no matter what.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I typed that into Google. I said, what's an equation, or what's it called, where you can have a infinite possible derivations, deviations, and no matter what happens, it's the same outcome. And idempotent came back as the only option.
Huh.
And it's a word from the mid 1800s.
Huh.
And it's I think one of many. I think it is the, like, item is an item, not like an item, but that's escaping me again. Every time I bring this up, I have brain fart. So I'm
Maybe
looking.
you're not supposed to know it. Maybe there's like some hidden force opposing your mental knowledge. This is the key for the forces of good to finally liberate themselves. And
Well, so this is the interesting thing, is that the word now is synonymous with coding and with computer programming,
oh, really?
because computer programmers have to program in certain binary, obviously it's all binary, code, in order to get, no matter what the customer wants, for instance, for shopping, they can go and look at 15,000 items, but they know no matter what they look at, it's only the only things that are going to end up in their shopping cart are the items that they click on. So idempotent, that would be an example of an idempotent equation, where no matter what they look at on the store's website, they're going to end up in their shopping cart. They're going to end up with only the items that they clicked on specifically to buy. Another example, which is the reason why I was looking this equation up, is because life is idempotent. So you're born, you can do any infinite number of permutations in your life, and then you're going to die. So no matter
Right.
what you do in your life, you're still going to die.
Right.
So it would
Oh,
be
I
idempotent.
see. Yep.
So you have infinite possibilities within the construct of your life, but you have only one possible outcome, which is death.
Oh, nice.
So it's fascinating to me. And, being a wordsmith that you are, I thought, well, maybe, and also because you have such a background in philosophy and psychology and other ways of thinking, that, it might be something you've come across before.
No, I have to say I haven't. I very much like the fact that you're so fascinated by words. I'm that kind of person too. And every now and then I'll run into a word that, well, and then there's that thing when you say a word enough times and it's not even real anymore, which I don't know what that's called. And it can be
I
a
don't
very
know.
simple word like brush or something. And you go, is that really it? But no, idempotent. No. Yeah, I just looked it up. It's a linear algebra matrix thing. And,
Yeah.
it's as you described. So that's curious. And it reminds me of this crazy stat that I read a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
which is that there's a trillion years of stars followed by 10 to the 106th years of black holes, which by analogy is like 1 second of stars
Mm-hmm.
followed by a billion years of black holes. So that's what science says right now. So
Jeez.
if that's
That's the
true,
current.
yeah, that's the current. I had no idea why that's true, and I wouldn't have the math. And
Yeah.
if you read enough science fiction, like Werner Vinge's a Deepness Upon the Sky,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of variable physics is available, where everything, the constants that we always assume are true. That's we don't know. We don't even know that a piece of plastic that's gonna, deteriorate in 1,000 years is gonna, how do you know? A
Yeah.
1,000 years hasn't passed. You don't
Right.
know, but science likes to say it knows those kind of things,
Well,
right?
that's the interesting. So one of my favorite scientific studies along those lines is muons come streaming through our planet regularly, tiny little quantum particles, the muon. So,
Right.
and a
And
muon,
nothing stops a muon, right?
nothing, to my understanding, I'm not a
Maybe a
physicist.
black hole. Maybe that's the point.
Maybe not, though. I don't know. These things don't seem to be affected by gravity,
Right.
but they decay incredibly fast. So, and they're traveling at, basically near light speed or light speed, extremely fast.
Mm-hmm.
So the decay of a muon happens in like 0.00001 second, or whatever the actual measurement is. And so they determined that, well, if they decay that fast, from the time they enter this part of our atmosphere and the time they hit the earth, there's only going to be X number of muons that make it to earth because of the decay, right?
Right.
So they went and tested that, and they were off, like exponentially off.
There were
And
many more muons than they thought.
many more hit the earth than or went through the earth than they expected.
Right.
And because they come in and out of existence, and they decay so fast that, like, but they figured out how to track them, they figured out how to measure them, they figured out how to
Are there muons going through our bodies right now,
right now.
statistically?
Yes.
Like more than one, like a lot?
Trillions. Like,
Fuck that.
I think it's in the trillions. Maybe it's only in the billions, but to most people, the difference between a billion and a trillion, it's so
right.
difficult.
No, we're culturally innumerate at that level.
Yeah, culturally, yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. We're culturally innumerate at that level. I love that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, most people can't go past. Yeah, even imagining more than 10,000 or something is hard.
Yeah, even a million. Even a million, as much as it's talked about, is completely amorphous, in reality, when you look at it. Like 10,000 is probably, probably anyone listening is like, no, I understand 10,000. I understand 100,000, but like $1 million. So like I used to do home insurance. And so in selling home insurance, you talk to people who buy, $100,000 homes, $500,000 homes, multi-million-dollar homes. And it's interesting, the conversation with different people and the concept of $1 million home versus a $200,000 home. It starts becoming very amorphous. Anyways, that's a whole nother conversation.
So let's just back up. We were on muons, and before then we were.
So wait, let's hit muons for 1 second, because there's something there that's, I think you'll find interesting.
I got my tweezers and catch one.
Yeah, catch one with your micro tweezers.
Like micro tweezers.
What they found is that the internal, or the operating speed, if you will, of a muon is faster than the operating speed. It's slower or faster? Yeah, it's faster than the operating speed that we exist in, that we vibrate in. So our perception is that there's going to be fewer that make it to Earth, but because they're operating at a higher speed, time slows down. So we're going at 1/10 speed. So 10 times more muons make it.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's interesting.
To that effect.
That's an interesting way of dilating consciousness and putting things on. And, and then we get back to ideas like Ken Wilber in Integral Theory would talk about even subatomic particles having prehension all the way down to the quark. And that's interesting. Are they on some, what is awareness? I mean, I'm a panentheist generally. I do think that the divine is interpenetrated in all of material reality, but also transcends it. But I don't know. That always made the most sense to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like we're going to dig more into philosophy than anything else for the time being.
We don't have to. We can go wherever you like.
Well, I'm wrestling with some of this stuff today, so it's come up more than once, and I feel like you're a good person to bat around some of these things. And at this point in time, I don't have the audience to know what they're going to love or hate. So this will just be a good, test of, okay, what are they loving or hating?
Go where you want to go and do what you want to do with whoever you want to do.
All that. Exactly.
I mean, because I'm not expert in these areas, right? I mean, I would only say I'm an expert in two things, which is the healthy selves thing and rebound exercise. That's about all I'm really, and maybe in writing, but not, I wouldn't even say that. But in production writing, being able to put out a lot of output when I have to. It's not so much expert as just, that's what I do.
You take it in, you're able to process it and then churn it out.
And I'm able to work with people on all different levels. Sometimes people have very detailed outlines of what they want their book, like the cross-border wealth guide up there. He knew everything. And sometimes people come with vague ideas and they've written a few pages and you do a lot of research and it's always all over and sometimes you can finish people's thoughts. I'm pretty good at knowing where the thought train is going, especially if I'm with a client and we're, and they can start talking and they can't find the words, but I can find the words because thoughts are like ocean waves that break on the shore of more than one mind at once.
Hmm.
So I know where they want to go because that's where I want to go for it to be coherent, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Well, no, I mean, and that's why philosophy, for the most part in the Western world, is considered a science and mathematical, is because it has a formula. And if you are, a critical thinker tracking a line of thought, then the logical explanation or the logical conclusion has to be pretty much one thing based on the parameters that they set forth, and ergo, the different schools of thought.
No, I mean
So,
there are different philosophical ways of proving things for sure, and that's been going
mhm,
on for thousands of years, right?
mhm,
Starting with Pythagoras, right?
yep.
And before him, I'm forgetting who was before him, but it goes back a long way, and even though the dialogues the Platonic dialogues are a
Yep.
kind of proof of their own. When you read a whole dialogue and hold it at once, which almost nobody does, especially on the longer Platonic ones, but like something like the ones where Socrates has been sentenced to prison and it's now time for him to leave, the Crito and the Apology, it's like having watched a symphony.
Mhm.
If you know about symphonies, you realize that the notes you heard earlier, you're aware of them when it closes at the end. I study this by listening to the Teaching Company course on great music by Robert Greenberg, but I listened to
Nice.
many hours and I learned, and my brother played the whole classical canon. So I mean,
Mhm.
I kind of get it, and it's the same thing in these dialogues. They're making you have to really hold the whole thing to see why they were even writing this and what they
Yep.
were trying to show to people. And like the bit about Socrates going, you know what? I'm not afraid of death because nobody has any idea what happens when we die. Nobody.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep going,
Yeah.
and then of course he ended up saying, I'm going to stay loyal to Athens, which is like my city and my mother, rather than escaping like all my friends are trying to get me to do. I don't
Right.
want to escape. This is how I live my own, life of truth and justice. So
Yeah. I
I,
mean, Socrates is interesting because, he wants to look at, and this is one of the things that I feel like I don't know if this is still taught, but the Socratic method, as I understood it or learned it when I was a kid, was, you ask questions through conversation to make sure that you're having the same conversation. So, for
well, it's to
instance,
do that and to elucidate the fact that the person to whom you're asking the questions already has the answer within them. So,
right.
one of the most famous ones is with Meno, a slave boy, and he gets him to prove the Pythagorean theorem in real time.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it's
I don't know. I'm
yeah,
not familiar with that one. That's
yeah, you
awesome.
should read the Meno. It's not
The
that long,
Mino.
and yeah, and he has this whole group of people saying this boy is ignorant, he doesn't know anything, and Socrates has this way of talking where he says, well, if you see, a bird flying like this and this on a tree, what do you know about that? And by the end, he has, in law, what we call leading questions, right? He's
Right,
totally,
right.
totally leading the witness, but yet there's still an element in there of he knew, and which also
Hmm.
brings us to Immanuel Kant, who asked the question, how are synthetic a priori questions possible? How can you know that 2 + 2 is equal to 4 before you ask the question and answer it? And yet we know. And
Hmm.
so he spent a lot of time saying, basically saying we had a faculty that knows, which really doesn't satisfy us anymore. But, people have been thinking about this stuff for a very long time. I
Oh,
do love
thousands of
philosophy.
years. Yeah. And I mean, the current conversation, the big philosophical conversation I feel like that most people want to have right now is the simulation theory. Like, are we living in a simulation? And,
Right.
to me, that conversation is only made possible because The Matrix was, released in 1998 and introduced people to the concept of life is a dream as a simulation.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant and powerful.
Yep.
And, we have Elon Musk saying the odds are trillions to one that this is a simulation. And I think, I'm a pragmatist. So
Hmm.
the only Native American philosophy. And I want to believe things that are going to make my life better and,
Hmm.
and, and that I can otherwise define as good. And the word good is its own definitional thing. There's nothing underlying the word good in philosophy. And we can talk about that. And so as a pragmatist, it's not going to make any difference to me how I live my life if it's a simulation.
Right.
I mean, now That's not to say that when the guy who did self-development for smart people, Steve Pavlina, do you know his
Mhm.
work?
I don't.
Oh,
I've heard of
you
the.
should. He did a 3 hour thing about if this is a matrix, here's how you can interplay with it. And Steve is kind of straight. You know, he
Mhm.
wouldn't do well in any of the clubhouse woo-woo rooms. He's not like
Right,
that.
right,
But he had a huge audience in the hundreds of thousands of people, and makes his money by the high level courses.
right.
But he had all these ways of just saying, start pretending it's true for a few minutes. That if you start asking the universe for things, it will give them to you.
Yes, that's
He
the
didn't
guy.
say this,
Okay,
but
yeah,
like start living what Rob Bresney would call a life of pronoia. Start assuming that there is a vast conspiracy dedicated to your enlightenment and satisfaction and pleasure and joy and happiness and your ability to give your gifts and all those things. And if you start taking that true, what actually
right.
happens is the
And
question.
the I would say the kind of pop culture version of that is Pablo Coelho's book, The Alchemist.
Yeah,
When you
there's
follow your
always going to be,
bliss, the universe conspires
or
to help you.
right. And The Secret was another one, big
Hmm.
bestseller that was very much like that. And, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, things are probably, I don't know, things are more complex than that, I think, but, maybe
I
not.
don't
I mean,
know that.
but first of all, how long can you sustain that? Because I'll go in these business rooms, these
Mhm.
hyper 10x business rooms on Clubhouse, and their advice is always, if you have a thought or an idea that's not in line with your 100% success and 10x in a year, then just banish it. Don't let it come up. Either way, and I'm going, Healthy Self says that doesn't work. Healthy Self says you got to listen to that voice because it might have some valuable information that you're otherwise ignoring.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to learn to work with that part of you anyway. You can't just kill it and
Yep.
suppress it forever. If you try to do that, if you succeed, it'll make you crazy and you probably can't do it anyway. So instead of trying to be a single-minded fanatic, really work with all of these parts and
Yep.
all of these voices. And having said that, there are different things we can all do that, we know we should do, like Cole and Ta, the whole, if you don't track it, you can't change it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And, I struggle with just a couple of things like eating too late at night
Hmm.
and sometimes too much cannabis late at night, and that'll stop
Fair.
me from sleeping.
Yeah.
And
It
most of
interrupts your
me,
dream cycle. Yeah.
yeah, and most of me knows all about this. And
Hmm.
I've got a Whoop tracking band, and I wrote an article on sleep, and yeah, the part that wants to open the refrigerator and eat the pudding is really a different part of who I am, and
Okay.
that's
So,
one of our points.
yeah, this is okay. This is an interesting kind of jump to something deeper because you're an incredibly smart person. You've been very successful as a writer, and you've
I'd
got
like
the
to be more.
degrees.
I'd like to be more successful. If you know anybody who can get us a national review of your Symphony of Selves in the New York Times, the Washington Post, because I know there's reviewers who do psychology books in those
Yeah.
magazines who would recognize the metal of the work, as they said in the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
You just
Right.
have to pick up the book, and it's an important book.
Yeah.
But we can't buy a national review, as it were, because
Hmm.
we're really trying to induct a paradigm change, and nobody wants the paradigm change.
Well, I think it's one of those books that is going to be picked up in the not distant future. And the reason why is because everyone's looking for something, but no one's able to see in front of their face. No one wants to be fighting with their friends and neighbors and family, but we're
Right.
all fighting with our friends and family and neighbor because we've been asked to pick sides, and dutifully, as good members of society, as we're trained to be from a wee child, we pick up the mantle and we pick sides. Especially in America. America is I listened to an incredibly successful businessman. He created the movie picture company, a legendary
Oh
film.
wow. Oh, they're
Um,
huge.
yeah, big,
They're top.
powerful.
They're top tier.
Oh yeah, and he's done numerous things. I'm blanking on his name, of course, but he's done numerous other business ventures. He's extremely successful. He's also his band opens for the Rolling Stones. So this guy is a multi hyphenate of the highest order. Um,
Yeah, I know who you're
he,
talking about actually, but I can't remember who it
I
is
can't think of
either.
his name. Anyways, anyone who looks up, founder of Legendary Pictures is going to find him, or who the band opening for Rolling Stones is going
Uh,
to find him.
I'll do it. Keep on
Um,
talking.
so what's interesting is, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going? So
Founder of Legendary Pictures. You were saying nice things about me, and I interrupted you because I couldn't stand the compliments, I think is where we were.
fair. Um,
Thomas Tull,
Thomas Tall. I think that's it. That sounds right. Tall.
Tull.
Yeah.
Like, well, let's
Yeah.
not get stuck there.
He was recently on the
You and
Lex
I could get
Friedman
pretty
podcast. Yeah.
ADHD with each other.
Yeah. Which is fine. I mean,
Yeah,
this,
because who's to say one train of thought isn't? It was 1,000 different trains of thought we could go down. Which one? But you're in charge. Which one should we jump on? Choo and choo our thoughts.
um, we've kind of played around with this idea of philosophy for a bit. Oh, I know what I was going to go for is in your history. So, you recognize, thoughts and thought patterns and so forth. And you've got the whoop and everything else. So how much have you tried to create a mindfulness practice for yourself?
I try all the time. I mean, I do a breathwork pattern. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very simple polyvagal pattern. It's a breathe in for 3, hold in for 3, breathe out for 6, and hold
Mm-hmm.
out for 3. So it's 1, 1, 2, 1.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll move it to 2, 2, no, to 4, 4, 8, 4. So
Okay.
it's 3, 3, 6, 3, or 1, 1, 2, 1. The pattern is 1, 1, 2, 1. I usually do it as 3, 3, 6, 3, and
Okay.
sometimes I do it as 4, 4, 8, 4. And I'm doing that a half an hour a day while I'm doing other things, while I'm bouncing on the rebounder over there, which,
Mm-hmm.
and I do sit and do a kind of conscious gratitude practice. But, sitting in a regular mindfulness practice has always eluded me, as it has my buddy Jim Fadiman. And in fact, I'm finishing, we're in the last weeks of this book on mindfulness. I understand, but I feel like I go into my own flow and pattern of flow states, partly with the bouncing, partly when I'm writing. And I do work the breath pattern. I mean, like when I'm with my men's group, we meditate for 20 minutes,
Right.
by Zoom or in person. I mean, I don't dislike meditation. Um, but I just don't, I'm just, and I always feel
That's
bad in these
interesting.
rooms
So
where
do
the first
you?
thing people always, and I mean, I had Rick Hansen, who's a very famous author now, as a therapist for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, why can't I get you to meditate every day? And I went, it just doesn't work out. And so that's an excuse. I clearly, if I really wanted to do it, or someone's going to pay me $1,000,000 if I did it for a month, I'd do it.
Well,
But,
maybe not though. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that you identify meditation and mindfulness as the same thing. Is that accurate based on
no,
what you
no,
just said?
no, that's a conflation. And in the
Okay.
book, we go out of our way to talk about great differences. Mindfulness, really. So, yeah, I would say that I'm a lot more mindful now because of my understanding of selves
Mm-hmm.
and having not just written about this book, but practiced an awareness of what we're talking about that has distinctly changed me. And so, keeping that in your symphony of selves, we like to say
Mm-hmm.
mental health is being in the right mind at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very closely related to mindfulness. If you think of that Viktor Frankl quote about there being a second after something happens where you can respond or not respond.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm much less likely to get into stuff with the people in my family, my household or my daughter or people in the real world. I here at age almost 62, Aries sun and moon, very impatient, sometimes obnoxious and too smart for my own good. I'm calmer and mellower, and I almost never say the obviously wrong thing anymore. I've learned not to go into the wrong or the worst self at the worst time,
Right.
at the wrong time. So in a way, that is a mindfulness practice as
Yeah,
well, because
absolutely.
having an awareness that I'm always, and that includes for one, I've been down a couple of times. I had a breakthrough experience with a group of men that are my men's team in
Mm-hmm.
December. We were working with a substance called white lily, which is actually legal, and with a facilitator, and it's a heart sacrament, and it was really profound. And since then, I've been in a deeper space, and yet there's new challenges. My cat has
Yeah.
diabetes. I freaked out. I kind
Yep.
of lost it until I got processed by these guys, Brian and Hesby Kaplan, who do reverse psychology and humor with selves. And I told them how I wanted to feel, and they
Reverse
asked me for
psychology with humor of
reverse psychology and
selves
humor on subselves.
on
So
subcells. Okay.
basically, I was very upset about the cat, and he's going to have a shortened life, and what are we going to do? Right now he's actually got a monitor on, and he's starting to feel better. It's
That's
fine,
good.
but I'm very attached to my cats and a little
Mm-hmm.
bit I want to say hysterical, and I was having trouble calming down. A few levels of people processed me, but it was still really heavy. And then they said, I went into a room. They've been in one of my rooms on cells, and we know each other. But I said, will you do your process with me? I'd like to experience it. And they said yes. And first they ask you for your permission to say anything that comes to their mind. It's outrageous, contradictory, inflammatory, anything for just a minute each. I said yes. And they said, what do you want? And I said, well, I want to be in the part of me that recognizes how much I love this cat, and it's going to be an intensification of the love and the experience, and it's good we found out so early, not in the part of me that's just really unhappy and crying all the time. And so I said that, and then he went first, and he said, well, I'm getting something from the cat. He's like saying, they're British, right? He's like, knock it off. Stop, come play with me. This isn't that bad. You're being ridiculous. We're gonna have, and then she went and she said, well, what I think you should do is get your sword, or maybe a gun, maybe if you have a machine gun, or maybe an atomic bomb, and start taking it out on everyone in the world that you feel so upset about your cat. And she went on for just 1 minute. And when she was done, first they had me kind of crying, and then they had me laughing. And when it was all done, I was so much lighter.
Yeah.
They lifted like 85% of the load was gone, because they got me to laugh at the part of me that was just like, 3 or maybe 8 years old and had just gotten a cat, and it's like,
that's the old saying, laughter is the best medicine, because
it just really worked.
It helps you process.
It was a minute long each, and I had a micro epiphany. They were great. And so, there's just another way that they've been working with selves for 30 years, and they have their own gig, and they absolutely know it's real, and that's how they're able to work with it. Yeah, they're fun. Their new book is about to be out. It's called Almost Happy.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I've been doing the mindfulness thing, meditation and breathing exercises my entire life. And so, for me, I had a very, very personal relationship with those words, mindfulness, meditation, and breathing exercise long before I had the experience of someone else's dogma or someone else's practice, or a quote unquote traditional form of meditation or mindfulness.
You just
or
like you learned it in your household, or from somebody you knew, or
my grandfather.
You were in LA and things were cool, and
no, this is actually in DC, Northern Virginia, where I grew up.
Oh, you grew up in Northern Virginia. Cool.
Yeah, in the DC metro area. And before I forget, my sister went to UVA. I kept on in the back of my head. I can't remember if I actually told you that. But
cool.
She was a guide in the guide services. Both her and her husband were guides. They met at UVA.
Charlottesville was an amazing place till there was that little altercation a few years ago.
Wait, say that again?
Charlottesville was an amazingly lovely place until there was that little altercation a few years ago.
Yeah. Evidently, that was pretty horrible. And that was obviously international
horrific
news. Yeah, it was horrific.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my grandfather, disowned my family when I was born, and then came back into my family when I was 4 years old, because he wanted to meet me, because at 4 years old, there's a religious, spiritual, energetic, kind of opening, blooming, or whatever. And so, and he had become a Jewish mystic and Kabbalist at that point in time in his life.
I didn't know that Kabbalah says that 4-year-old kids have a special kind of induction portal.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the details, because I haven't studied the Kabbalah at that level to know where he got that from. He was also big into lucid dreaming. Like, he spent years having deep conversations with a man that turned out to be Rabbi Luria. Rabbi Luria, and this is before he became, a mystic and a Kabbalist and spiritual. He would have these dreams and would meet this man, and they would have long conversations. And one day he decided he was going to go try to find this guy and find out if he was real or not. He went to, I believe, Israel, where Rabbi Luria lived. Although now that I'm saying that, I don't think it was Israel, because this would have been in the 14 or 1500s that Rabbi Luria existed.
Oh, Isaac Luria, that rabbi.
Yes.
Luria. Yes, he's very famous. He was blind, wasn't he? Eventually he was blind.
Eventually, I think he was blind. But my grandfather, my understanding,
your grandfather couldn't have known someone in the 14th century.
Right. Or at least not on, the way we understand, So this is a dream, but he had these dreams regularly. He remembered them. They were
Uh-huh.
deep philosophical conversations. And as he started, because this would also have been back in, I think, the 50s or 60s, early 60s, late 50s. There was no internet, and I don't know that, Rabbi Luria was easily searchable at that point in time. So I don't
Right.
know. My understanding is he did not know who Rabbi Luria was until he went to go find him.
Uh-huh.
Because in the conversations, he knew where he lived, he knew the school he taught at, everything. And so when he went to go find him, he actually found the school. There's a whole long story. It's really interesting. But the point of all of that is my grandfather became tapped in, so to speak. If you're a skeptic, obviously you just think he's a loony, old dude that liked the dream and was very philosophical. But So when I was 4 and he decided, no, I've got to go and meet my grandson because this is, some sort of, energetic awakening or spiritual, big moment in his life. My family, I guess, was like, I don't know about this. Is this really a good idea? My dad said, fine, but we're not having this conversation, or whatever. Because my dad's a hard existentialist or atheist. And so my grandfather would tell me stories. And the only way to describe them, they were very psychedelic stories, because he would transport me. And I felt as a child that his stories transported me throughout time and space. And I saw things through my imagination or through his imagination, or a combination of the way he
Ah,
told stories.
how lucky you
And
were.
yeah, it was an amazing experience. And um, and I also had dreams with my grandfather. It was very, very difficult to, as a child. It was easy to process because it just is what it is. This is my life. This is what my experience is. After he passed away, when I was 15, um, things got more difficult because I realized he was kind of my spiritual touchstone here on earth. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, I couldn't talk to my dad. My mom wasn't really talkative about spiritual or non physical experience, the imaginary process. And so, my creative world became my everything. And this just kind of became, this physical existence just became, what I had to do. Like, this is, well, I've got to do this. But the real world is my imagination, which is why acting and writing were like my end all be all, because that gave me a chance to play and be creative and live in this other dimension. And I was good at this physical, quote unquote, objective reality. It just wasn't my preferred state of being.
Right.
So it was, but he was the one who introduced me to everything that. And I started studying martial arts at a very young age. By the time I was, I think, 6 or 7, I was learning Qigong from some dude at like a summer camp. And I would practice throughout the year between my grandfather, the Qigong, and exercises. And then my mom introduced me to books like the Tao of Pooh. It's a very simple Western use of Winnie the Pooh to introduce people to Taoism. And
Hmm.
then there's the Day of Piglet. Um,
Huh.
and Say again.
No, I didn't. I never heard that before. The Day of Piglet. That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, the Day of Piglet. Because Piglet's so virtuous and he runs around full of virtue, but he is basically overwhelmed with his virtue and has a very difficult time making decisions and worries about everything because he's so virtuous.
Mm.
So the virtue has to be balanced out with the it's, shit happens,
Yes, it
so,
does.
um, yeah, so great books, two amazing books, highly recommend. I've given them away so many times to so many people, but that was my introduction. So between performing, music, acting, writing, my grandfather, and martial arts, I had an extremely in-depth relationship with breathing exercises, meditation, and mindfulness long before I understood the history, or that there are many codified practices that have 1,000-year-old lineages and longer.
And real value that can be shown,
Yeah.
evidence-based practices.
Yep. And so when I started finding those is when I started playing to understand that versus what I was doing. And I saw no difference. It's like speaking Spanish versus Portuguese. There's a lot of similarities, but they're very different languages.
Mhm.
So, and, to some extent, like I used to teach meditation in my early 20s. And the primary thing I tried to explain to people was that anything and everything can be meditation, because it's just simply extended thought on something, and without allowing anything else to distract you or come into it. So it's basically single-mindedness. And that was the way that I tried to explain it, and the words I tried to use to simplify it for people, because I was in North Carolina at the time, and people in North Carolina just weren't big into meditation. And so I was trying to introduce people and create a community, or expand a community that that existed, so that I could be a normal human being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to find
And
a way to fit in,
yeah,
and to also get in touch with your natural urges.
yeah. And so teaching, I didn't really directly teach breathing exercises. Breathing exercises, I worked with people through martial arts and through swimming, primarily. And then I would also talk about mindfulness as this is how you reprogram yourself or retrain yourself to do anything. And it seems to me that mindfulness now, as a practice of, no judgment, and just letting whatever happen, you're just going to sit there, not in meditation, but in awareness of all of the things, and taking stock, and no judgment, and, kind of like the first time you're seeing it, all the kind of basic principles of mindfulness. There's research done with active duty military showing that 12 minutes a day for 4 weeks, you can increase your focus, decrease your stress, sleep better, and just have quantifiable shift in your performance and your well-being and other metrics.
I
And
know the work of Dr. Amishi Jha at the University of
yes,
Miami is. So I know her a little tiny bit, and we did an article on her, and she signed off on it. And I know one of her partners works in the law school there also. And
yeah,
yeah, there's no question it
I would
works.
love to talk to her at some point in time.
Yeah,
But
she's a
yeah, I
big
mean,
fish. She's got a new book out, so
yeah, no,
I'm sure it's a national bestseller.
she's been making all the rounds. She's been on the
She's
Duncan
the right
Trussell
person at the
podcast,
right
and
time with the right machines that go
yep,
ping, and
yep,
she knows how to use them,
yep,
and she can, like, and she says things like attention is the brain's boss.
yeah,
Makes it very simple.
yep,
Wherever you put your attention, that's what your brain is actually going to do, and
yep.
we can show it. I also like people like Jim Rutt. Do you know Jim Rutt?
I know the
He's
name. I'm not
he's got a podcast called the Jim Rutt Show that's pretty successful.
okay.
He was the CEO of Network Solutions when it got sold to VeriSign, and then is
Okay,
one of the co-founders of the Santa Fe Institute. So I used to help him with a little bit of his writing, and one
nice.
of the things I learned from him is that every 1/4 of a second, every 1/4 of a second, your attention decides whether to stay on what it's on or move on to something else. And the longer you keep it on one thing, the more intense the desire to move it to something else is. And this is happening at 1/4 of a second increments, and they were
Hmm.
able to sort of show that.
That's interesting. I don't, I mean, yeah, I would have to read or listen to that more, because it's one of those things where uh, I mean, it makes sense, but at the same token, I know from, extended meditation or extended any exercise, physical, mental practices or whatever, you can train yourself to, I wouldn't say reduce the urge, but you can
Well, I
nullify
mean,
it.
it's a little bit hyperbole, but Charlie
Yeah.
Tart, the famous psychology professor of parapsychology, who
Hmm.
I've gotten to interview a couple of times, and he's a really nice man, additionally, and an Aikido guy. But he has this exercise in one of his books where he says, if you could actually stay fully focused on the second hand for 5 seconds before it hits the 12, fully focused, you would be enlightened. But you can't. None of us really can. I mean, maybe Osho could, that sort of thing, or
Yeah.
some saint. But we're just, So what we've learned is that attention takes an object. That's why you can't multitask. You might think you're multitasking, but you really can't multitask. And awareness and attention have this constant trade-off. The more focused you are on one thing, the less your overall, let's say, situational awareness becomes.
Hmm.
And it has to be that way. But hopefully, as we get wiser, we know when we can and can't make those trade-offs, when you can't
Yeah.
just really focus on something and ignore everything else, so you learn.
I mean, I think that's maybe the most important thing is when you can and cannot make the trade-offs, because, there are certain things that you have to, sure, your attention may want to wander, or you may want to go and think about something else, but you have to be able to say, no, no, this is more important. Like if you're
Right.
free
Yeah, you have to
diving.
be able to keep focus and keep returning.
Yeah.
But the research Amishi Jha has done, and
Hmm.
others, maybe to others, I forget their names, but it's the number is that mind wandering, which is defined as you have a discrete task that you want to do,
Hmm.
right? Mind wandering, which means you're focusing on something else, happens 47% of the time. 47% of the time, no matter what we're doing, our mind tends to
Yeah, that
wander.
sounds
Now
about
that's not
right.
now that's not true of everybody, right? And you're
Right.
exactly right. When I'm going through these 16 chapters for this book, and I'm through 10 and I've got 6 to go, and it's hard reading something for the fourth time and then still having to work things out and get the words, and it's like I have to focus or it will never end, is how it feels. Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, it's what I do. But there are times when you're in the flow and it's easy. And there are times when you're not in the flow and you have to go, yes, I understand you don't, this part of me doesn't want to be here anymore. You're really not supposed to sit for more than 30 minutes at a time. They're calling it sitting syndrome. Sean Wells is all over that. And, generally speaking, I don't sit as long as we're doing right now,
Right.
just because it's literally all cause mortality rises 2% for every extra hour you sit a day.
Yeah, I
It's
remember
like,
the Huberman, Andrew Huberman has a podcast, and he's talked about being active and so forth. And I mean, there's some truth to that, but then there's also the ability to undo all of that by other practices, movement, and so forth.
oh
So
yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff we can do. And that's why, I'm so into the rebounding, because it's
yeah,
the easiest, fastest, most effective type of exercise I've ever experienced.
yeah. But I mean,
And but we
but
all got
don't
to
you
do.
think, but
Go
don't you
ahead.
think one of the problems is our obsessive need, and I'm obsessive from a cultural standpoint, to to find something else to redefine, because perhaps instead of it being a bug that our mind has to spend 47% checking on other things, perhaps that's a feature. Perhaps
Yeah,
that
you're
is
right.
a
It's an
valuable
evol-
thing.
it's an evolutionary adaptive mechanism, right? We don't pay attention, we can get eaten or predatorized,
Well,
or.
sure, there's that side, but I mean, from another standpoint, I mean, that's the physical harm standpoint of, being able to be alive and check in and look around and make sure we're not going to be eaten. But perhaps there's another factor, which is if you don't do that, you fall asleep, or you leave your body, or you no longer exist on this, in this conscious state.
Yeah,
Because if you
it's
think
basically
about,
how our brains work, is
yeah,
what you're saying. You
because
like it's like a car revs at a certain speed, right?
right.
It's always going. You can't just right. It's on.
And so, if you sit and focus, you know, like if I get into a meditative state, I can get pretty quickly into hypnagogic kind of like waking dreaming place, if that's the desired location.
Or
I
you
can
can go to
also,
alpha pretty easily.
yeah. So and I can, and I would love, I'm one of these days I'm gonna go and buy a brain trainer and just be able to see,
Yeah,
okay,
like the
like,
Muse or one of
yeah,
those things.
I want to see, okay, how fast and how quickly can I put myself in the different, brainwave states, because I think it would just be interesting and fun to see how fast I can
Yeah,
get
I
in and
have a
out of
friend
them.
on Clubhouse who is, struggling sometimes with her life, but she can almost write her signature with brainwaves.
Oh
She's
wow,
like
that's cool.
phenomenally powerful. Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. It's like, once you tap into your rhythms, your patterns, and so forth, then from my personal experience, it's like, okay, so this is part of what makes my personality the way it is. This is part of what makes me make decisions. This is part of, why I'm interested in the things I'm interested in, is because I operate like this, I rev like this, I idle like this. And
Hmm.
so that turning on the attention, that 40% mind drift or mind wandering, to me, the way I've heard it talked about, is more of, it's like the only advantageous thing I've heard it mentioned is the don't get eaten. But I think there's another aspect of it, which is being alive, which is that is the whole point of this physical existence
Well, you have
to
to be
some extent.
flexible though, right? So like in some of myself and some of my sub personalities or personas, I can probably keep it to 80 to 90. If I like really want to get
Mhm.
done, and all I do is turn on Brahms. I'm
Yep.
not also listening to a Clubhouse room and checking
Right.
stuff, because Brahms is my very favorite work music. And I will just, or sometimes it's best really nothing. If I really, I'm gonna have to say, if I really want to hyper focus, no, you turn down the external input dial to flat, and I can do that. But there's other parts of me that are really bad at focusing. They call me
Hmm.
ADHD boy sometimes upstairs, and it's like, yeah, but I'm really competent. I get all the stuff done. I manage this for the house. But there's other times I was like, I'll leave stuff out, or I can't find something right in front of me. I'm just like, and disorganized. I mean, part of the price of being able to focus so much is that some of my other parts really have to be desultory. They have to be able to just kind of randomly just go about and do whatever happens next, rather than plan or be focused or anything like that.
Okay, so on that track, then, do you think, or do you know that you were like that 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been true. I believe I am, well, one of the guys in my men's group called a moving centered person. In this
Okay.
one framework, there's three different types of, or four, and the 1% are the move. I really don't know what I'm feeling or thinking I really don't know what I'm feeling unless I'm moving, which is why I'm on the
Okay.
rebounder an hour day. And I
Okay.
often, just like I really don't know what I think a lot of times, ultimately, unless I write it out. I've been
Hmm.
typing for 56, 7 years, and my fingers will often know where I need to go when the rest of me doesn't know. But generally speaking, when some people come into a room, they look at the environment and they see everything and they notice what's there. Other people are all about the energetic relationships between people and tuning into
Mhm.
that. But both of those people stand still. For me, I always keep moving for as long as I can, kind of like a cat. When I first get to any place, even a big hotel, I will walk the perimeter if it's possible and
Oh,
feasible, just
interesting.
because I want to see what's there. I know that the world is filled with interesting, impossible phenomena. I do not, materialism is false, and I want to see what environment, reality has co-conspired with me to present.
So, okay, along those lines, then, have you've known you've always been, what is now called ADHD?
Yeah, I don't really think I'm diagnosable, but I don't believe in diagnoses. But go ahead. Yeah, I
Right.
certainly
Another conversation altogether.
I can exhibit some of the traits. Let's
Right.
put it that way.
And perhaps under certain circumstances, everyone's going to have those traits, and everyone's going to test positive under certain test conditions,
Right.
perhaps. So,
And different parts of me, that is, and that's why it's so hard for me to take ordinary tests.
mhm,
Different parts of me, the different cells, if they're really real, they are going to have different characteristics. They will
sure.
respond to an Enneagram test differently. They will, you know, and so it's like, which part of me is up now? I'm, trying to be the professional, well-informed
Yeah.
part with you right now, but that's not
Well,
all of me.
well, no, and fair. And I mean, it's but it's interesting because you're in your early 60s now, and a lot of what you're telling me, someone listening could basically say, well, sure, he's in his 60s, of course he knows who he is, and and that he likes to walk the perimeter of a hotel kind of thing. But at some point in time, you had to understand that about yourself or come to the realization. So, and that's something that I think is really interesting, how and when people come to certain realizations about themselves, because that's a lot of what gets in people's way, I think, is not seeing some of their habits or some of their quirks, and knowing how and when to allow themselves to kind of go there or not go there.
Is there a question?
At what point in time or
Oh, that
how
question.
was it that you figured out that you like to walk the perimeter, or that you needed to do
Okay,
certain moving activities?
so look, I always knew that I was, in some ways, now that I'm on Clubhouse and there's people who are way more woo-woo than I am, and
Oh yeah.
all sorts of strange powers beyond ordinary human, it's like, it's not the same. But even as a kid, I was always doing different paths. So this is a strange memory, but there was this kid around the block named Frankie who was 3 years older, but I kind of had like a friendship crush on him. And then I had another friend named Andrew, who was a year younger and lived right across the street. And then Frankie's grandmother held this party. And she said, whoever picks up the most stuff on the ground after this raucous party gets to go with me to Jamaica and hang out with Frankie. And I saw 2 or 3 kids like head for the big pile in the middle. And I thought, no, I'll just do the entire outside exterior perimeter where no one else is looking.
Oh,
But it turned
wow.
out, of course, that I didn't win because there was not enough out there. But
Right.
nonetheless, looking for those kind of outer breadcrumb trails. So I've always been into the psychic stuff and read all of the parapsychology studies, and I've interviewed, Charlie Tard and Dean Radin, and know Russell Targ personally. He's like a family friend of my wife's because she knew his daughter, who was, Elizabeth Targ, who was a very famous therapist who got money to study remote healing from the NIH. And so like, I've always been around these people, and I always wanted to come out to here. And I actually wanted to go to ITP, Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, when I was 21. And I came out and became a legal secretary in San Francisco, living by myself for a little bit of time. And I was way too young to go through with that whole plan. And
Right.
and I looked at ITP, and I just wasn't old enough. I came back when I was 24, and I just wasn't old enough to move out and mature enough. And I went back, and then, to New York, and then worked for a while. And then I went to law school. But I've always been drawn by this nexus of conscious and philosophy and badass magicians. So like the pagan movement. And I've seen some powerful rituals that, I mean, I've never believed materialism is complete. In the book The Supernatural by Whitley Strieber and what's his name, Jeffrey Kripal.
Yep.
There's this thing called the honey jar story, and
Sounds
the
familiar.
conclusion of the honey jar story is that this academic was washing this honey jar in his sink, and he dropped it into the sudsy thing, and he heard a noise in the closet, and he went in the closet, and he reached up to, and he saw something as a Ryan, and he took out this big baking tin full of flour. And as he did, it became suddenly heavy and it dropped. And he reached into it and he opened it, and he pulled out this a honey jar, just like the one he was washing, caked with flour. And then when he went back to the sink, it was not there. So it's really well told. And the guy is like a high level academic who's not into anything woo or spooky or anything. And he got him to tell the story. And so my experience of life has often been like that. Too many synchronicities, too many crazy things, especially, from 21 on with psychedelics. I know that we are co-creating reality right now.
Yeah.
That mind is, if not primary over matter, like let's say Hinduism, it's at least coordinate within its co-arising.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So since this is all really happening, we're only using a small fraction of our potential, obviously.
All right. I
And
mean,
I've
that's
always
kind of
wanted more.
an agreement.
I've always wanted more of it. Right?
So
That's my game.
early on in the conversation, when we were talking about philosophy, I was going to ask you about idealism as a philosophical model, not as, idealistically, I would like to believe, or materialistically, I
Well, I
want
know
a
what
car.
idealism is.
So, do you think, I'm just kind of curious, this is, part of the earlier conversation on philosophy, from the standpoint of where we're at right now in our current conversation, cultural conversation. Materialism has been reduced to I just want a fast car, and idealism has been reduced to kind of almost romanticism, or like it would be nice if everyone treated everyone perfect, but it's not going to happen. So get
Yeah,
in touch.
but those are not the meanings we've been talking about. Those are like slang
Exactly.
cultural derivatives.
So that's what I'm curious is, in your sense, because you've gone down a path since your early 20s of a very intellectual pursuit. And one of the things that I've noticed, whether I'm talking to an entrepreneur, very successful, multi-million dollar, business leader, owner, founder, or I'm talking to more of a creative who's also grounded in a very real and successful career as a writer, there is a element of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, esoteric or ephemeral talk of energy and talk of the intangible.
It's, I could see if this is where you're going, and maybe you're not, maybe it's a little bit escapist. I mean, I remember being in college and working for the New York Public Interest Research Group. We were anti-nukes and we were anti-testing. Banish Hoffman wrote The Tyranny of Testing in 1968, a Queens College professor. He showed even back then that the standardized tests were like, it's way unfair. And we all knew this. And I did have an epiphany back then in college. And it was that politics as usual is not going to change anything. That the revolution really has to start with a consciousness revolution. And that's why I was taking acid and reading Huxley and Leary. I met Tim Leary 3 times. I got high with him each time. And of course,
that's awesome.
Jim Fadiman knew him very well. They were in each other's lives for many years. So it's interesting getting to hear some of the history.
Did you know Abbie Hoffman?
No, never knew Abbie Hoffman. Steal this book. Never met him. No, he was way before my time. I mean, I was fortunate
I guess
in the sense that I was born in 1960. So we had a basketball court in my backyard, and when Light My Fire was the big song, it played all summer long while we were playing hoops out under the lights late at night. So, and my brother and sister are both older, and so there was a lot of the 60s music. We had a piano, a baby grand. I remember when I was small enough to fit in between the legs each had 2 legs turned. I could fit between it. And the Moody Blues is always like one of the books that was up there. And, if you knew my musical taste, it's pretty sappy, deep 60s. The revolution is still possible based on love and consciousness and awareness. So, I also sort of take responsibility, or maybe I don't, as a boomer, because I knew also in junior high school, I wrote like a 100-page paper called Overpopulation and Multiplying Man, where it was clear, even back when in the mid 1970s, the second report to the Club of Rome and Silent Spring made it very clear that we were on a path to destroying the natural world for real, and including probably having an 80% overall human death rate the next. Maybe that won't happen, but we knew, and I was aware of that my whole life and freaking out. And then I decided that, so I don't want to retreat, Epictetus's garden and retreating the life of, there is part of me that is like that. I am a bit of a pleasure demon, and we won't get into my habits and what I really like, but, I live a good life. I have a hot tub and an infrared sauna and cats and rebounders and, massage devices, and on it goes, right? But I'm also like, part of the reason I'm so into what I'm doing with Jim and why I'm doing a reading room every Thursday for your Symphony of Selves. We had, this was our 3rd today, and yesterday rather, and it was over 100 people showed up, and
that's amazing.
25 are staying the whole time. And a year ago, I didn't have that kind of posse on Clubhouse rather. But each of the people I asked to do readers and co-mods, they're my friends now. They're interested in the book. They like it. They appreciate my quirks, and I appreciate theirs. And some of them, like Eric Grace, his room in the Holy Human Club, I never thought that you would find me working with a path called the Adharata that focuses on Mother Mary, because I turned down Christianity my whole life. I was either like some weird spiritual new age guy or neo-pagan or a
And
Jew,
now
but I'm
you're
not
working
Christian.
with a group to talk about Catholicism, or
Right. And,
at least
and
the
we've gone so
Mary.
deep, well, because I translate it as being the goddess. So,
Yeah.
and also substances are a big part of my life. When I was, in my early 20s, on a full dose of mushrooms, not a heroic dose,
Right.
but a substantial dose. I went to a pagan festival under the full moon, skyclad,
It's got to
with
be
a
intense.
priestess from Massachusetts. And
Hmm.
as we were singing and dancing, I felt Gaia come over the horizon and settle in and over us. I felt, a personal direct contact with the earth goddess herself. For me, so I mentioned the guy named Bill Eichmann, who was very important to me, and he died a couple of years ago. What Bill would say was, all we really know is that we're animals on the surface of a planet and we're going to die. That's all we really know.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is to kind of we have to break our feeling that our primary vow is with anyone but our own ultimate infinity. You want to make your parents or even Gaia herself, none of those is my ultimate, sovereign. You have to be your own self-sovereign on the deepest levels in which you are the ultimate. We're back to Ken Wilber or Rajneesh,
Yeah.
only one sky. There's only this moment with all of us, and we are that moment. We are the leading shock front of the Big Bang in this moment, reflecting on itself. And there are probably others. Well, there are others, right? But right now, it's just me and you. It's easier to see.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's my mind or your mind might go, and touch our loved ones or our animals. And, while we're sitting here talking, our minds may reach out, or, my dogs come over, one of my dogs is come over many times to be like, hey, we're getting close to dinner time here,
Yeah.
and, so even though that's going on in this moment, all that may exist, but this is our reality. And I mean, and that's by
Well,
design,
and
that we agree
you
to
get
that,
into these new notions of time. Oh, yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention to you. Okay, just a quick segue or
Yeah.
sideline. The idea that there's only one electron is also freaking me out, as well as the black holes thing.
I love that concept of
That
there's
there's
only one
just one
electron.
electron, and
Yeah.
that everything is happening at once because it's time differentiated.
Yep.
So it seems like it's everywhere at once, but really it's everywhere at once. And it's
Mm-hmm.
another one of those things that I can't. I love it when I know my mind is like mathematically overwhelmed, and I just have to give in and just appreciate what I'm experiencing. And the same happens with words. When people are in really good raps, some of my favorite orators on Clubhouse,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you what they said or explain it back because I'm too in the feeling of what it means, in a sense that beyond words. So I lose track, and I know I couldn't follow it, which is why I know how to record things and write them down and all that. But
Yeah,
there are
but I think
times
there's
when,
something to that, because you can take things in a multitude of ways. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like trying to sleep with meditation tapes on and other tapes, or maybe that was before we started recording. But that was, there's listening to a conversation, like for instance, podcasting. I think some of the reasons why people, turn on a podcast, especially in the audio only format, is because they need something to listen to while they're doing something.
yes,
And maybe it's
all the time.
cleaning, maybe it's driving, maybe it's while they're actually working on something else. And
I do all those.
yeah, and I do too. And a lot of people do. And there's certain podcasts that I might have to stop more frequently to listen to. There's other podcasts that I can just have on, and I'm going to pick up anything and everything I need to pick up from it without having to focus on it. And I think that has to do with partially the way our mind works. And so the more similar, like maybe the better way to explain this for what I'm trying to get at is, if I get an audition and someone sends me the sides, my agent sends me the sides, I look at the words on the page, the faster I can memorize it, I know that I am more in sync, and like I just understand the writer. Like I understand what they're going for. I understand the show. I understand this train of thought. Like we were talking about earlier, when you're working with a client, whether you're ghostwriting or collaborating in some way, you know where their mind is going. So even if they haven't gotten there, you can get them there because you see the logical conclusion of
Right.
that
I can
train.
get them there and I can pull out the word that they can't
Yeah.
quite get to. And
So,
that's
and
kind of what I
people
do.
who think very differently or are offering something new, like if it's an audition for me, I'm going to have a harder time memorizing that because the patterns and the rhythms are just not the music that I'm used to hearing. And I listen to a lot of music, you know what I mean? I listen to a lot of rhythms, a lot of patterns, a lot of different, thought, modalities. And, I try to make sense of it all and see where the correlation is. It's like Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell took all of the historical legends, myths, and brought them all together and parsed them out and said, okay, this story is in every culture. This story is in every culture. What does this mean? Looking at the human condition. And to some extent, I try to do that just for myself in where people are coming from. And so listening to someone that might be controversial, like I'll listen and understand, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not, where they're coming from and why people are resistant to them, and or why they're not being understood, or like, someone that might be flagged as an anti-vaxxer who, if you listen to them, is clearly not an anti-vaxxer. Like stuff like that, like I pay attention to because for myself, I want to know why this person is being misunderstood, or why this media outlet is trying to, push an agenda that leans, politically right or left. And in doing that, it's kind of like looking at different myths and from different cultures and saying they're saying the same thing and they don't even know it, and or they don't want to acknowledge it. And I feel like that is at the heart of, being able to, reach people, or being understood. Like you found a greater audience on a platform, Clubhouse, because you were able to speak, be heard, be understood, and then the people that naturally vibed with you, you developed relationships with, which is obviously why you're here now. And
Yes.
that is fascinating to me because I vibe with most people I come in contact with. And if I don't vibe with them, it's typically because neither of us have had an opportunity to find out if it's possible. You know what I mean? Like circumstantially, it's like, I know someone's kind of giving me side eye at a party or something like that. And it's like, they don't know me. And therefore
Or
they
they're
either,
just projecting on you whatever is going on for
right,
them.
they're either projecting or they heard something, and whatever they heard is tilting them. And sometimes I've literally gone out of my way to kind of poke that person. And I don't know that I've ever, quote unquote, poked someone, not actually physically poke them, unless it's like a tap on the shoulder. I don't think I've ever done that and not ended up having a positive experience,
Right.
because people, and this is my experience, if you're in person, or if you're even not in person like we are now, where we're focused on each other, um, will always do what they can in order to understand each other, unless there is some preconceived thing
Yeah,
that they're
unless they
fighting
decided ahead of
against.
time, right, that they're
Right.
not going to and they're not going to be open. Yeah, most people you will actually, yeah. I mean, although there's also some people that just, at least for me, dislike me instantly for no apparent reason, and it's always been that way. But I mean,
But I don't know that they actually dislike you. I just think you trigger them in some way. And
right.
instead of confronting that trigger, they just dismiss you, because it's easier to dismiss someone than to deal with why someone's triggered.
Right, or just assume that I'm massively privileged, or I mean, I'm thinking back to some of the people who I've had real
We're
stuff with,
Americans. We're
and
all privileged.
yeah, it's true. So I do have a quick story there. I was taking, I started group therapy at ITP just to try it. This was like 1989. And we went and sat down at Cafe Baroni, which is on El Camino Real. And it was very crowded, but there was this table that was almost completely empty. And I sat down to hold it for the group and gave someone else my order. And I sat down, and this big biker with hugely tattooed and hugely drunk with a beard and the whole thing slammed down a mug, sat right next to me and said, "My name is Dog Breath and nobody fucks with me." And I was terrified. I thought I was,
Awesome.
he had to be 300 pounds at least. And clearly, and the whole biker jacket and my people came back and we just kind of sat around him. And then at a certain point, he turned to me and started telling me about all these stores that wouldn't let him come in and how his girlfriend was being mean to him. And he just kept talking and how sad he was. And eventually he kind of put his hands on his arms and fell asleep. And he just wanted to be listened to by anybody. And that's, that's a lot of what it is, right? It's just being willing to be present enough to let all of your stuff down and have no agenda and just validate other people, including not wanting to fix them, which of course is how men famously get in trouble with women. They want to tell us something and we want to fix it. And they actually want you to just hear it and be with it with them. And that's hard to do sometimes.
It can be difficult if you're in fixer mode. It's hard to not then try to fix when someone says, "I got this problem," or what sounds like a problem to be fixed. I just had a weird thought when you were talking, connected to the whole triggering thing. What if, I mean, this is a very esoteric jump into, we're all here to help each other. What's the Ram Dass quote?
We're all walking each other home.
Well, okay. So it's an esoteric leap to that. But what if the triggers, someone who, instantly doesn't like you, as you said, what if what's really happening is they're asking for help? Hey, you remind me of something from my childhood that's very triggering. Would you please help me get over that? You know what I mean? Like, help.
So basically you want to recontextualize like everything as a cry for help on some level.
I don't know. This is just a thought.
That would be along the lines of people who say that, it's all love unfolding. If you can actually hold even the worst things that are happening to you as love unfolding in real time, well, then you would be enlightened. I used to believe enlightenment was like a state thing. In college, I tried to fast myself while taking psychedelics into enlightenment while reading Huxley, and it didn't work. I actually got pretty sick and fucked up. And then I ate pizza to break like a 10-day water fast. Like, how fucking stupid can you be? But and I gave up that thought of enlightenment as being a permanent state of wisdom and orgasmic bliss and power and all that stuff. That was just my delusional.
What do you think enlightenment is now?
I think it's what Erwin Greif said it is. And Erwin Greif was a psychic I once had who's dead now. He would say things to me like, "You want a plan? I'll give you a plan. Let go and let God. That's the only plan." And then he would say, "You're not normal. You're not normal in any way. Forget about anybody else's diet or whatever. Your body will do whatever it needs to do. You're not like other people." You have all these things. But Erwin Greif also said that enlightenment is just being perfectly fine with how you are at this moment. And that's like the belief that the thing that keeps you from being enlightened is the belief that you're not enlightened. And did you know that I still to this day control the domain name enlightenment.com?
Really? That's a cool URL to have.
It's a long story and it's in mothballs and it's been through many phases and I'm not selling it for less than 1.5 million. So don't even bother asking for that.
Have you gotten offers even close?
We had an offer for like in the $250,000 range once, but they wouldn't tell me who it was, and so there was we did have an active community, and I did do like 80 people were doing micro blogging under our banner. It was called Spirit Blogs. And I did 15 interviews with people like Byron Katie and Gene Houston and Jim Fadiman, and so I was posting. This is in the late 1990s before anybody else was doing any of that stuff, and then we did the first ever Ken Wilber audio interview. But then I figured out I didn't really know how to what to do next, and it didn't work out. And so I realize that the next time I enter a different business than the one I'm in right now, and I
Mhm.
do have an idea around rebounding in these body blades and building sensors for them that I will show you that you do amazing amounts of moving weight if you rebound with body blades for 10 minutes. I want to have sensors built, make that a product. But I'm realizing that I'm not going to try to launch a product as an entrepreneur where I'm doing everything ever again. I'm going to have to,
So
it's going to have
difficult.
to be good enough where my enthusiasm has convinced people of business experience and merit and who have their own levels of funding so that we realize that I really am like Shirkin or Underhill in A Fire Upon the Deep. I have a lot of great ideas and they come, and you know I'm not that good at actually building or executing on the real world. It's a different skill set. And
Yep.
so I mean, in the rebounding and my own personal practice and all that, I'm figuring out new stuff that no one ever has just because I can and I want to.
Yeah.
And the self stuff with Jim, we're taking it in new directions. But to actually like build a product and ship it and have money involved, and I mean, I could do a little of the law part, but you need people who know what they're doing, or there's so many people out there doing so much.
Like you said, it's a skill set. And I mean, I've done a little bit of that, and I get to a certain point, and like my father and I had a food company for a little bit, and we had products in Whole Foods, and we were
Oh
talking to
wow.
airlines about, getting, servicing them, because it was just a higher quality, better food product. And,
Right.
the shelf life wasn't very long because the quality was high, but that was the whole point, is that, let's turn out, high quality food instead of low quality food that lasts forever and ever.
Right.
And, we ran into some problems, and basically what it came down to is either we need to really truly believe in this, be dedicated to it, and invest, really get investors to build a kitchen so that we could deliver the volume we need to deliver, and
Right. You
at a
have to
price
build the
that,
infrastructure to a
yeah.
whole other level. And it takes my friend Steve McIntosh, who's an integral political author and who I went to law school with. And he has a company called Now and Zen. They did the Zen alarm clock, which you may have
Okay.
seen, and
Yeah. Yeah.
just a few products. And it's a national brand, and
Yeah. Hmm.
basically it kind of runs itself at this point. But he spent years like going to China and talking to the people at the factory, and
Hmm.
does the bell work on this triangular clock that
Hmm.
strikes at the right time and does this beautiful Zen time? Is it going to actually get progressively louder? Does it? It's like it was hard, and
Yeah.
it's like unless you know somebody, and even then, as soon as you're a couple of levels out,
But it's
it's
not
like
just one
people who
person you need to know, it's multiple people that you need to know, because either that, or
yeah,
you have to be willing to, build, you have to build the runway, you have to build the plane, you have to build the
right,
engine. You know what I mean? So either you need to know a lot of people to get something really done and off the ground, or you have
right.
to really build it all. And just having the knowledge to build it
Nobody can build it
all,
all hardly. I mean, Elon Musk sort of, I guess, kind of
eh,
knows how to
he
have people build
he
it all in a lot of
has
different areas.
he has a lot of knowledge around a lot of key elements, and I don't want to discount his intelligence or anything else, but, and this is actually Peter Thiel's words, his former partner from
I know who
PayPal.
Peter Thiel is. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Eric Weinstein a little. I met him at a party.
Oh,
All the
that's
women
funny.
were swooning at him because he's so super smart.
Oh God. That's funny. That's interesting. But Peter Thiel basically called Elon Musk a Jedi salesman. He has the ability to get you
Like Steve
to,
Jobs was.
exactly, pay him to paint his house, kind of thing.
Right, Mark
And
Twain.
yep, exactly. And that, you can be as smart as the day is long, or 10 times smarter, but you can't do it yourself. Not
So,
really. You could start things
have you
yourself,
seen
but you
these
need help.
genius rights rooms in Clubhouse?
No.
Yeah, there's this, it's an outlier guy, and he puts out this whole meme that what we really have to do is find the super geniuses like Musk and support them, because it's through them and them alone that all of humanity's next greatest innovation. And then he was talking about how like he had 8 or 12 different dimensions of intelligence mapped out, and that somebody becomes a super genius when they're like 7 standard deviations above the average on like 5 or more of these. And it was all, and then they were talking about, but he really thinks that geniuses are oppressed, is his whole shtick. It's really bizarre.
I, you know, I understand that, but that would kind of go against everything of history, because the geniuses or the innovators will always find a way. And the ones that don't are doing it at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong people.
Also, two different views of history: the great man, great human, the great person theory, and the great time theory. The great time theory says when it's time to railroad, it railroads. When it's finally time for us to go into VR and really get huge benefits, that will happen. Even though they keep telling us we're already there, it still hasn't happened. And my experience with that is putting on an Oculus 2, because I was writing an article for a client about VR and working with the world-class expert Marcus Shingles. And I loved it while I was doing it. And the day I finished the article, I haven't put the set back on, even though I actually went ahead and ordered the special like contact lenses that'll be perfect for my glasses, and I won't have to wear glasses. I was like, I'm just not actually interested. It was kind of headachy, and it was cool. And I had to actually go to my knees when I was over the Iceland volcano the first time. And yeah, it's really freaking cool. And it's every bit as good as the holodeck in Star Trek, The Next Generation. This world completely goes away. It already fools the brain. It's just going to get more powerful, but I don't, it's not human life. So we're going to see more and more people, and AR and VR are going to blend seamlessly, even in the same devices. And there are going to be people who get hyper addicted and spend nearly all of their time in VR. And maybe eventually, I was thinking the sci-fi level, people who just have the goggles and the things wired on, and with the brain implants. And we already cyborgs? People have argued about that. When you're using your phone all the freaking time, are you becoming a cyborg?
Becomes an extension, yeah. So you're already
the technical definition of a cyborg is we're already cyborgs. So and yet we're also wonderful human beings who have levels of intelligence and intuition and power that we have told ourselves. I mean, we're back to Wilbur again. The dignities and the dangers of modernity. The danger is that we flatlanded it. We only believe in material external reality in a very certain narrow way. And most of what's really important to us, we say, because we can't measure it, it's not even really real. And you and I know that that's ridiculous. This is very real. And we get back to the word meaning,
I think that's probably which dogs are going crazy. We're gonna have to cut. I know, Bean. I know.
Yeah, I know. We're probably near the end of our time.
Yeah, we're coming close. We need to wrap up here in a minute. I think that measurement comment though is a kind of good last note to sit on though, because there's some of that is where we started as far as like how do you know when you got where you're at, or how we've kind of
how do I know? How do you know if you're actually more mindful? And really, the only way is to know that you don't make as many as the same mindless mistakes. That's how you tell. You keep track.
Exactly. And I mean, this is the thing. It's like, I guess the biggest thing that I want people to take away from this is that it's never too late to start tracking and to start measuring. And our conversation has ranged, we've been talking for about 2 hours, and our conversation has ranged a great deal and ping-ponged all over the place.
That's the only sport I'm good at, and Frisbee.
Right.
I was on the high school table tennis team.
And so I'm trying not to get distracted by that. But we understand each other. And I think anyone else listening would understand. And like, that's kind of the thing. It's like, mindfulness to me is not giving yourself a hard time over what you are seeing yourself do. There's a great quote. I don't know where it's from. I'm not good at always remembering where I find things, but the ideas that I love, I just kind of keep with me, even if I don't know where I got it from.
Well, you make them yours in that way.
But yeah, there's the idea that once you are aware you're doing it, it's no longer a habit. So a habit ceases to be a habit and becomes a choice as soon as you're conscious of doing it. And that kind of
and we can talk. I mean, in the Selves book, there are a lot of practical. It's not a how-to book or a workbook, but we do cover a lot of the techniques and tools that other people use. And one of my favorite ones is the Odysseus Pact. Odysseus was out there, and he told his crew, as they were heading towards the area where they knew there would be these sirens, they had heard stories. He said, "Whatever I do, do not untie me from that mast. I am going to order you in real time to untie me from that mast. But if you do that, we will all die. Now, of course, everyone on the ship dies anyway, but him.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a fake thing. But, you can make these pacts with
Yep.
the parts of you that are likely to be up in real time when you've made the same mistakes, that you've walked up the same path with the same people, and you go, no, this time I'm actually going to practice DNI, the mindfulness practice DNI, do not interrupt. Go for a minute and be aware of your impulse to interrupt and see how that feels with you.
Yes.
Go for a whole day. Practicing DNI for a whole day is nearly impossible for someone trained as an attorney. It's just,
Oh, that's interesting.
but you can do it. And you have 1,000 reasons for why it's now time to interrupt this person. And you see it in Clubhouse, right? There are people who give other people much longer and shorter ropes, and that's part of the skill of being a good mod and knowing how to do it. Although there comes that moment more and more when people are just flying their plane before landing their plane and going on for a really long time, and then someone else calls out their name. And the conversation, the person usually goes, "Oh, did I too long?" And the other person goes, "Well, yeah, maybe a little too long. Could you wrap?" And it's like that weird thing of you actually did interrupt them because it was too long. And were you right?
But see, that's also, I think, the difference between a dialogue and a monologue, because a monologue can go on and doesn't necessarily have especially an internal monologue, theoretically, it doesn't have to have an end. It can go on for days,
Well, right. And there are people
whereas
who
a
are like that.
dialogue there's two parts, and there's an interplay, and there's a balance that has to take place. And like, that's the most interesting thing. Like, you and I have kept up with each other, and we've been batting 100,000 ideas around. And that's the interesting thing about a dialogue, is that if either of us were to try to recreate this as a monologue, it would sound so weird and surreal. It wouldn't be real. But the fact that we're both here having it, and there's two sides of it, it's real, it's authentic, and it's happening.
Although in our case, I think we understand each other, and we have a similar intellectual throughput speed that we're both flowing with, and similar parts of the world, similar backgrounds in some ways. And I've even got the 3 years of Taekwondo, not like you, but I did study with a world-class master, and I get it. And so I think we could I think you could do the whole dialogue because you're a pro.
I appreciate that. On that note, I think we're going to end it, because that praise is I can't even handle that.
Really?
All right. I appreciate that, though. Thank you.
Wait. I want to sing one thing to end us out, because
please.
I'm not good at it. It's from Moulin Rouge. Well, it's David Bowie, but earlier it was Nat King Cole, and earlier it was Addis Abba. It's Nature Boy. But just the end. This is my takeaway from this life, and I think it's still right, which is, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And I think that's it. It's
beautiful.
It's
a beautiful
giving. And Bowie, I'm like a major Bowie file with you.
Don't forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday, and short clips from each episode are on YouTube. Thank you. Until next time, don't forget, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.